What's up, summoners, and welcome to my Ultimate Sylas guide. In this video, I'll take you through everything you need to know to absolutely dominate the Rift with Sylas. Now, I've packed this guide with tips and strategies you won't find in most other guides, so stick around till the end. And if you find it helpful, hit that subscribe button for even more guides that will take you to the division you've been working toward. Alright, let's jump right in, starting with the basics. Who is Sylas, and how do you master his abilities? Sylas is a powerful mid-lane mage with insane burst damage if you know how to play him right. But he can also fall behind quickly if not handled correctly. When it comes to ability order, I always start with E, and here's why Sylas E has two phases: a dash, followed by a second phase with long-range damage and a stun. Those two phases mean two passive stacks right from the start, giving you a huge advantage in early farm and trades. When choosing Sylas' second ability, you'll want to go with W, not Q. Here's why. W not only dishes out damage but also gives you a heal that scales with missing health, and hey, it's a dash too. Now, when it comes to maxing out skills, here's the breakdown against long-range champs like Cassiopeia or Ahri. Max Q first, then W, and facing close-range champs you can beat, like Malphite or Yun, max W first. So whichever skill you max out first, remember, start with W and Q, and save E for last. And as usual, level up R at 6, 11, and 16. Now, Sylas has some crazy combos, and I'll be breaking those down for you soon. But first, let's dive into the ideal build for Sylas to make sure you're ready to go full throttle. Let's get into it. To start, I usually go with Doran's Ring for solid early stats. But if you're up against heavy hitters like Yuan, Yasuo, or Irelia, Doran's Shield can be a lifesaver for that extra durability. Go with what feels right for you, both are great options. And if you're feeling spicy, there's always the troll option, Dark Seal. I sometimes use it, but honestly, I don't recommend it. For core items, I begin with Hextech Rocket Belt. This item is perfect on Sylas, giving you a dash with added burst, plus ability power and haste to keep those combos rolling. Next, I go for Shadow Flame for even more burst damage. After that, adapt based on the enemy team. If they have a lot of add, go Zhonya's Hourglass. If they're heavy on AP, Banshee's Veil is the way to go. I finish off my build with Rabadon's Death Cap for raw power and Crypt Bloom to amp up your sustain and damage. As for boots, Sylas is flexible. If they're running full add, grab Plated Steel Caps. If it's a CC or AP heavy game, go with Mercury's Treads. But in most games, you can't go wrong with Sorcerer's Shoes for that magic penetration boost. Sure, there are other build options you can try out on Sylas, but I highly recommend the setup I just shared. It's super versatile and works in almost any game. That said, feel free to experiment and adapt your own builds as you get more comfortable with him. The beauty of Sylas is his flexibility, so test things out and find what works best for your playstyle. Remember, mastering Sylas is all about knowing when to adjust. Now that we've covered skills and builds, let's dive into what Sylas can and can't do on the Rift. Sylas' strengths are serious game changers. He's got insane combo potential with massive damage, and when played right, he can outplay almost any champion. Plus, his ulti stealing ability lets you turn the enemy's R abilities against them, giving you incredible flexibility. And with low cooldowns, he's especially powerful in this patch, with one-shot potential when you nail those combos. But remember, Sylas has his weaknesses too. Being a melee champ, positioning is everything. You need to carefully manage incoming damage and watch your position in teamfights. Hitting Q and E accurately is key to maximizing his damage, so a bit of practice will go a long way before jumping into ranked games. And don't forget, his R can steal any ult in the game. This means you'll want to know what each stolen ult can do and how to use it best. While he's a bit weak early game, with the right approach and some practice, you'll see Sylas shine. Mastering him might take time, but the payoff is so worth it. Before we jump into the early game, let's talk runes. Sylas has some awesome rune setups that can really boost his performance, so let's break them down. Domination Sorcery for a burst-heavy setup. Go with Electrocute as your keystone, then add Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, and Relentless Hunter. Pair this with Mana Flow Band and Transcendence from Sorcery for more sustain and cooldown reduction. This setup is perfect if you want to deal explosive damage and keep moving around the map. Precision Resolve if you prefer extended trades. Try Conqueror with Presence of Mind, Tenacity, and Last Stand. Combine this with Resolve Runes, Second Wind, and Unflinching for extra durability. This setup shines in longer fights, letting you stack up and stay in the action. And here's a lesser known but solid setup: Inspiration Resolve. Pick First Strike for bonus gold and damage, then Magical Footwear, Biscuit Delivery, and Cosmic Insight. Pair it with Resolve's Second Wind and Unflinching for that extra resilience. I use this one myself sometimes, and it's fantastic for both sustain and utility. Each of these runes works great with the build we talked about, so you can choose based on your playstyle. Alright, summoners, now that we've covered the essentials, let's jump into the early game, the phase where the fun truly begins. Sylas' early game plan depends heavily on who you're up against. Some champions like Cassiopeia are tough matchups that you'll want to avoid picking Sylas into if you can. On the other hand, there are matchups he thrives in like Malzahar. So be smart with your picks and avoid going up against hard counters. In general, your early game focus should be on farming and trading based on your lane opponent. Keep an eye on objectives like the Dragon and Rift Herald. Losing those early can give the enemy team a serious advantage, so lend a hand when you can. Don't forget to ping when your opponent leaves lane, ward your surroundings, and keep track of the enemy jungler. Also, remember that Sylas isn't usually a solo carry champ, so stick with your team for the best results. It's all about working together to secure that victory. By mid-game, Sylas is hitting his power spike, And your goal should be to focus on objectives and racking up gold to give your team the best chance at victory. If you manage to get a bit fed in the early game, now's the time to start picking off vulnerable enemies around the map. But don't lose sight of your CS. Keeping up your farm is essential to maintaining a strong gold income, especially if the early game was slower. Split pushing is another great tactic here. It helps you gain control over the map and opens opportunities for your team. Push a lane, then roam to help take down turrets with your teammates, gaining momentum as you go. And remember, vision is everything. Make sure to buy control wards every time you're back at base, and keep warding consistently to secure key areas of the map. This way, you're giving your team an advantage by limiting the enemy's movements and increasing your control. In the late game, it's all about teamwork. Split pushing isn't the best idea anymore. Your focus should shift to the inevitable team fights that dominate this phase. Your role is to protect your teammates and focus on squishy enemies. Remember, Sylas isn't the best tank buster, even with tank killer items, so avoid diving into fights with tanks unless absolutely necessary. Instead, look for opportunities to steal a powerful ultimate and unleash it for maximum damage. Keeping your vision strong is crucial in the late game. Map control can make or break your chances. Without proper vision, you could easily lose a game. So keep those wards up and make sure your team knows where the enemy is. Once you win a team fight, don't just celebrate. Push a lane as far as you can. This is your chance to create opportunities for game-ending plays in the following minutes. With these strategies in mind, you'll be primed to lead your team to victory. As a Sylas player, you must understand your role as a fighter mage, or you may end up being completely useless for your team. On lane, your goal is of course to win, but also to help your team with objectives and roam. You also need to look out for your lane opponent's roam so the enemy team doesn't get easy kills. This is pretty much same for every champion in the game. In team fights, you have to be able to stay in the front line, as in the back line you are literally useless. Choose your ultimate well. Your R can be a really impactful ability, especially in team fights. Sylas isn't a very good tank killer champion, so you should try to squish your targets while clearing space for your team. Don't try to tank all damage. That is your team's tank's job. When there is not an objective spawning soon and the enemy team is separated, you can try to split push a turret from the enemy team. It is pretty easy as Sylas, because your attacks against turrets deal a good amount of damage in the middle late game. You can also assassinate enemies that are alone, as you can win most of duels from middle game on. We've covered all three phases of the game, but let's expand this guide even further and dive into the art of roaming. Roaming is often overlooked by players, especially in the low elo. A good roamer can provide control over every lane to his teammates, gain a greater gold income for themselves, and keep up the control over their own lane at the same time. This might sound like a lot, but it is really easy when you know how to do it. Roaming can both help you and your teammates, so it is a great thing to do, as it can help a top laner win the lane against a hard matchup by giving them gold and time to gain more CS. Also, Sylas is a great roamer as he has CC, burst damage, and can steal anyone's ultimate, which makes him a really solid roaming champion. There isn't a timer that tells you when to roam, but there are definitely some situations where roaming is a great option. For example, after you have killed your lane opponent. If you have enough health after getting a kill, you can roam pretty freely, as most players expect you to recall after the kill. Another one, straight from base. Your lane opponent won't expect you to roam but to go back to your lane. It also is great to roam after power spikes, which often revolve around visiting shop. Other great times to roam are when you have your ultimate up, or the ally whose lane you are going to roam to has their ultimate up, as it gives a good advantage to the roam based on the ultimates. There are a few things you should take care of before going for a roam to make it more successful. Firstly, communicate with your team. Tell the teammates you are going to help that you are going to their lane before you go in or before you even leave mid lane. Also, clear your own lane before roaming. You can use your abilities pretty freely to clear the wave, as you are going to have them back before you enter the other lane. Also, look out for your lane opponent, as they might follow you to counter roam. If they do, it isn't a problem. You just have to inform your team that they are coming. This map shows you all the roaming paths that are worth showing. There are 3 different ways to enter the lane for both top and bottom lane. Firstly, there is the middle way, go through river straight to lane. This is best for a situation where the enemies have pushed the lane over their own side. It makes it easier for you to roam. The second one is through tri-bush. This path is also made to flank the enemy, so it only works on one side of the map for both lanes. It is mostly for situations where the wave is at the middle of the lane, as you can't walk through the river then. The third path goes through the enemy jungle to behind the enemy turret. This path is for tower diving the enemies. You can also tower dive the other turret if you walk from tri-bush to the nearest bush behind the tower. These are all the paths you should consider using. Now let me explain how you can play from the advantage and how to play if you are behind. If you win in early game, you have to play a bit differently from normal to secure the win for your team. Firstly, Sylas is a great snowball champion, meaning that if you get a couple kills early, you can turn into a late game monster. You need to play around minimizing the enemy team's gold income, as your gold income doesn't matter if your enemy team has the same gold income. Roam a lot to help your teammates gain control over their own lanes, get vision control over the map, to pick up enemies easily when they are too far from turrets. You should also buy Majai's Soul Stealer, as it is the best snowball item in the game. If you somehow lose the early game, you can't play normally, as otherwise you would probably end up as a feeder. If you are behind, try to maximize your gold income by taking CS a lot. Your main goal is to have 10 minutes without deaths and a perfect CS for gold income. Don't join fights you know you can't win. And don't fight on your own, only with a team to minimize the enemy team's gold income from takedowns. You can roam if there are lanes where your team is winning, as sometimes it is better to gain control on other lanes for a more successful late game. And there you have it, folks. I believe we've covered everything you need to know about mastering Sylas. But wait, don't go just yet. I've got some amazing combos coming up that you definitely won't want to miss. If you enjoyed this guide, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button to help push the algorithm and spread the word. Your support means the world and keeps me motivated to create more awesome content for you. I suggest these 10 pro tips about League that you didn't know and will end up dominating you on the Rift. Do not hesitate to watch the video.